My name is Bella Stephen, and I'm 29 years old. If you had asked me 10 years ago, I would have said I was part of the perfect family. After all, that's what it looked like from the outside. My parents, Victoria and Gabriel, were successful real estate agents, always dressed in expensive suits, always planning their next vacation to places like Cabo or the Bahamas. We lived in a beautiful Spanish-style house in a quiet neighborhood just outside Phoenix. Our neighbors probably envied us. After all, who wouldn't want to live the life we had? But no one saw what happened behind our doors. I don't think I realized how different things were until I was a bit older. But looking back now, I see all the signs. I remember learning to make grilled cheese sandwiches at age 6, not because it was fun, but because dinner wasn't always guaranteed. I remember riding my bike to school alone, starting in second grade, because my parents couldn't be bothered to pick me up. I learned how to separate whites from colors by 8 because I ran out of clean uniforms, and my mom told me, "Figure it out, Bella, you're smart." My best friend, Leah, always thought I was lucky. "You've got the perfect family," she'd say. But Leah didn't know what it was like at home. She didn't know what it felt like to be invisible. Our neighbors, Mrs. Rodriguez and her son Carlos, they noticed things before anyone else did. Mrs. Rodriguez was always outside, tending to her roses or walking their golden retriever, Sunny. She seemed to notice when something wasn't quite right. One morning in March, she pulled up next to me as I biked to school. "Bella, honey, you biking to school again?" she asked with a soft smile. "Yeah, my parents have a meeting," I answered, pretending everything was fine. She raised an eyebrow. "It's supposed to hit 95 today. Let me drive you and Carlos." I shook my head, trying to seem independent. "I've got my water bottle. I'm fine." She didn't argue, but gave me a knowing look. "All right, but you're welcome to ride with us any time, okay?" That day I sat in their car, the cool air blasting from the AC. I hadn't realized it at the time, but that was the first time I'd ever truly felt cared for, like someone actually saw me. It wasn't just Mrs. Rodriguez who noticed. My teacher, Mr. Washington, started picking up on things too. I'd fall asleep during afternoon lessons, not because I was lazy, but because I'd been up late, worrying about things I shouldn't have had to worry about, whether the water would be shut off or if there was enough food in the house to last until my parents returned from yet another trip. One Thursday after class, Mr. Washington asked me to stay behind. "Bella," he said, looking at me with those concerned gray eyes, "you've been really tired lately. Is everything okay at home?" I smiled, trying to brush it off. "Yeah, I'm just staying up late watching movies. I'm fine." He didn't look convinced. "If you need anything, anything at all, my door is always open." I nodded, but I never took him up on it. What would I have said? My parents didn't hit me, didn't yell at me. They simply didn't care. I wasn't the child they doted on. I was more like a houseplant, something you forget to water until it starts wilting. When my parents announced that they were going to Europe for a month, I wasn't even surprised. It seemed like just another one of their grand ideas. The Grand Tour, they called it. London, Paris, Venice, Barcelona, 5-star hotels, Michelin-starred restaurants, the whole shebang. My dad grinned with excitement, and my mom's eyes sparkled in a way I hadn't seen directed at me in years. But there was one glaring issue they couldn't seem to grasp: me. I was 11 years old, not old enough to stay home alone legally, not old enough to handle a whole month by myself. But to them, it was a non-issue. My mom waved it off like I was just some inconvenience. "You'll be fine, Bella. You're incredibly mature for your age. You can handle it," she said, the same way she'd always brushed off my concerns. "You're almost 12, my dad added. "It's just for a month, and we'll leave provisions." Provisions? What kind of provisions? A $20 bill, that's what? $20 for an entire month. I stared at the bill, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. "That's it?" I asked. My mom gave me a look like I was being ridiculous. "You'll be fine," she said. "We left food in the house. Spaghetti, ramen, canned beans. You know how to cook." Cook. At 11, I was pretty sure I could make instant ramen and grilled cheese, but that wasn't exactly what you'd call a well-balanced diet. "What if something happens to me?" I asked, my voice trembling despite myself. "Nothing's going to happen," my dad said, annoyed. "The house is safe. We'll be fine." And then they left. I stayed in my room for the first few hours after they left, trying to convince myself that this was all okay. It wasn't. The house felt like a mausoleum. Every creak of the floorboards made me jump. I couldn't help it. My heart pounded as I thought about the month ahead, alone. At first, I tried to pretend it wasn't so bad. I told myself I could handle it. I ate cereal for breakfast, sometimes a Pop-Tart if I was feeling adventurous. I watched Netflix, read books, and slept in. For the first time in a long while, I had no one telling me what to do, no one demanding things from me. But after a few days, I started to realize how little I had. I scrounged through the pantry, finding only enough to make spaghetti, ramen, or rice. The $20 sat on the counter, untouched. It was like some cruel joke. The days bled into one another. The nights were the worst. I could hear the wind whistling through the cracks in the window, the creaking of the house as it settled, the hum of the refrigerator. It all seemed so empty. By day 6, I had eaten the last of the milk. My meals were rice with peanut butter, or just plain rice. I didn't even have the energy to care. That was when I started feeling dizzy from hunger. But it wasn't just hunger, it was loneliness. I had no one to talk to, no one to laugh with. Then, on day 7, Mrs. Rodriguez knocked on the door. I was sitting on the porch, my head spinning from lack of food. It was late afternoon. The sun was setting, and I could feel the hunger gnawing at me. "Hi, Bella. Beautiful day, isn't it?" she asked, her voice cheery as always. "Yeah," I said, trying to mask how weak I felt. She squinted, looking me over. "Where are your parents?" "They're in Europe," I replied, a little too quickly. "They're traveling." Mrs. Rodriguez frowned. "How long have they been gone?" "About a week," I said, biting my lip. I didn't want to admit the truth. The shame was too much. "A week?" Mrs. Rodriguez looked at me, her eyes narrowing with concern. "Who's staying with you, Bella?" I hesitated, but I couldn't lie to her. Not anymore. "Nobody," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm fine." Her smile disappeared. "You're home alone?" "For how long?" she asked, her tone now serious. 3 more weeks, I said quietly. She stood still for a moment, processing the information. Her eyes flicked to my stomach, and for the first time, I saw genuine concern in her face. "Bella, I don't think you should be alone, not like this. Come inside, let's talk." I didn't know what to say. I wanted to refuse. I wanted to be left alone. But she was already stepping inside, walking past me and into the kitchen. I followed her, reluctantly. She opened the pantry, staring at the nearly empty shelves. "Bella," she said, her voice tight with disbelief. "How much food do you have?" "Spaghetti, rice, peanut butter," I said, feeling small and ashamed. "Bella, you can't live on this," she said sharply, pulling out her phone. "I'm calling Mr. Rodriguez. And then we're going to fix this. You'll be eating with us from now on, every night." I tried to protest, but she was already dialing. "You're eating at my house tonight. No arguments." That evening, I sat at the Rodriguez table, eating real food for the first time in days. Chicken enchiladas, Spanish rice, and a salad that actually had vegetables. For a moment, I almost forgot what it felt like to have a full stomach. But then the tears came, quiet at first, and then harder, as Mrs. Rodriguez sat beside me, rubbing my back. After dinner, she called Mr. Rodriguez into their bedroom. I could hear their voices through the walls, raised, urgent. "This is neglect, Daniel. Actual child neglect," I heard Mrs. Rodriguez say. "We need to call someone. I'm calling Mr. Washington. This isn't right." I stayed silent, numbed by the enormity of it all. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Mrs. Rodriguez's voice, calm but firm, speaking with someone on the phone. I could hear her saying something about emergency intervention, and the urgency in her tone made my stomach twist. It was then that I realized just how far this had gone. A few hours later, Mr. Washington arrived at the Rodriguez house. He was calm, but his concerned eyes never left me as he sat next to me on the couch. "Bella, Mrs. Rodriguez told me what's happening," he said softly, his voice filled with both worry and empathy. "I need you to be completely honest with me. How long have your parents been gone?" 7 days, I answered quietly. "And when are they coming back?" 3 weeks. Mr. Washington's expression hardened, his concern deepening. He reached out, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You're safe now, Bella. I promise you, we're going to fix this." But as much as he tried to comfort me, the fear still gripped my chest. What would happen next? Would my parents be mad? Would I end up in foster care? Within the hour, Child Protective Services, CPS, was on the phone with Mrs. Rodriguez, and a caseworker, Sandra, was scheduled to meet me that afternoon. Mrs. Rodriguez had already gathered evidence, photographs of the empty pantry, statements from Leah and Carlos, even Mr. Washington's testimony about my exhaustion in class. The truth was undeniable now. My parents' negligence was no longer a secret. When Sandra arrived, I was surprised by how calm she was. Her short brown hair and warm eyes made me feel as if she had seen it all. She spoke to me gently, asking questions I never thought I'd have to answer. "Do you feel safe at home, Bella?" she asked, her pen poised over her notepad. "I don't feel unsafe," I said quietly. "I just feel forgotten." Sandra nodded thoughtfully, jotting something down in her notes. "That's a very insightful answer, Bella, and it's important." She continued her interview, taking photos of the pantry, the fridge, and even the $20 bill my parents had left. Each image was a silent testament to the neglect I had been enduring. She then made a call, and I could hear Uncle Thomas's voice rising on the other end of the line. "They did what?" he shouted. "I'm flying down there right now, today." Within hours, Uncle Thomas arrived. He rushed into the Rodriguez house, pulling me into a tight hug. The smell of pine and his cologne surrounded me, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt safe. "I'm so sorry, Bella," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I should have checked on you more." It was a moment I'd never forget. His presence was like a shield, and I felt like the world I had lived in for the past week, empty, cold, and terrifying, was finally starting to crumble away. Uncle Thomas took charge. He called the lawyer, and before I knew it, an emergency custody petition was filed. I was no longer a girl trying to survive alone in an empty house. I was someone who had family, people who cared about me, who were willing to fight for me. That night, I stayed with Uncle Thomas at a hotel near my house. It was surreal, eating real meals, and having someone ask me how my day went. It felt like a dream, and I kept waiting for it to end, for the other shoe to drop. But it didn't. The next day, Uncle Thomas took emergency leave from his job as a software engineer to be with me, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't alone. I wasn't just existing anymore, I was living, and I was allowed to feel like I mattered. When my parents returned, tanned and glowing, expecting to waltz back into their perfect lives, they were met with a completely different reality. The house wasn't empty, it wasn't waiting for their return. Instead, Uncle Thomas was there, sitting at the kitchen table, looking like he belonged. My parents walked through the door, bewildered. "Where's Bella?" my mom demanded, her voice sharp. "She's safe," Uncle Thomas replied grimly. "More than you ever provided for her." The confusion on their faces only lasted a moment before their expressions shifted to anger. My dad looked at me, his face twisted in disbelief. "What is this? What's going on?" Before I could say anything, there was a knock at the door. My mom opened it to find Mrs. Rodriguez standing there, arms crossed, her face furious. "Can I help you?" my mom asked coldly. "Can you help me? Can you help your daughter?" Mrs. Rodriguez's voice trembled with rage. "You left your 11-year-old daughter alone for a month with $20. She ate rice and butter for days because you didn't bother to leave her anything else." "You're overreacting," my mom sneered. "She's very mature for her age." "Mature? She was eating plain pasta and rice. She ran out of food, and you didn't even care." Mrs. Rodriguez stepped forward, unrelenting. "She's been eating at my house for weeks. She was starving." "You had no right to interfere," my dad's voice raised. "I had every right," Mrs. Rodriguez shot back. "You neglected your child, and that is criminal." It was then that Mr. Rodriguez appeared behind his wife. "We've contacted Child Protective Services. They're already filing emergency custody paperwork. The court hearing is in 2 days." My parents' faces went pale, the reality of the situation dawning on them. They slammed the door in anger, but the damage had already been done. Their vacation, luxurious, carefree, and indulgent, was nothing but a distant memory. The truth had come to light, and nothing would ever be the same again. The court hearing was a blur of words and faces, but through it all, I felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time in my life, the chaos around me didn't seem to matter. What mattered now was the truth, and I knew it was finally coming to light. The hearing room was filled with the people who had fought for me: Uncle Thomas, Mrs. Rodriguez, Mr. Washington, and even Leah and Carlos, who had witnessed my lies about having supervision. Their testimonies were like pieces of a puzzle that finally fit together, showing the neglect I had suffered and how my parents had failed me at every turn. Mrs. Rodriguez spoke first, describing how she had found me alone, malnourished, and surviving on nearly nothing. Her voice shook with emotion as she recalled seeing the $20 bill that was supposed to last me a month. She didn't hold back, and her words struck like a hammer. Next, Mr. Washington took the stand, recounting how he had watched me struggle at school, falling asleep in class, distracted and exhausted, unable to focus because I was worried about whether I would have food when I got home. His testimony painted a picture of a child burdened by too much responsibility for her age, a child who had been left to fend for herself because her parents were too consumed by their own lives. When it was my turn, I sat in the witness chair, feeling small but strangely empowered. I had never spoken up like this before, never dared to challenge the narrative that my parents had painted for the world. But now I was standing up for myself. I told the court about the loneliness, the hunger, and the fear I had lived with for weeks. I told them about the times I had cried myself to sleep, not knowing if anyone would care or if anyone even noticed. The prosecutor didn't need to ask me many questions. The evidence was clear. My parents had failed me, and now they would face the consequences. My parents' lawyer tried to argue that they had left provisions, spaghetti, canned beans, and that $20. They tried to downplay the situation, saying it was just an error in judgment, that I was fine, that I hadn't suffered any serious harm. But the judge didn't buy it. "No real harm," the judge said, cutting off my father's lawyer. "You left an 11-year-old child alone for 30 days with $20 and inadequate food. The only reason she didn't suffer more serious harm is because of her neighbors and her teacher. You prioritized a luxury vacation over your daughter's basic needs. You didn't arrange for supervision. You didn't ensure she had adequate food or money. You didn't even check in on her." My mom's face twisted with anger, but the judge was unmoved. "I'm granting temporary full custody to Thomas Stephen, pending the final hearing in 90 days, the judge announced. "You will have supervised visitation only if Bella chooses to see you. As for the child support, you will be responsible for that, as well as all legal fees." My parents' protests were drowned out by the judge's stern words. It was over. I wasn't going back to them. Not now. Not ever. Over the next few weeks, I stayed with Uncle Thomas, adjusting to a new life. I wasn't sure how long it would take for everything to feel normal, but I knew I was on the right path. For the first time in a long while, I felt safe. I wasn't walking on eggshells anymore, worried about what would happen next. I didn't have to wonder if I'd have food for dinner, or if someone would be there to ask me how my day went. As the months passed, my parents' lives began to unravel. The $9,000 they had spent on their lavish European vacation came to light during the hearings. The money they had used to indulge themselves while I ate plain rice and butter was exposed for the world to see. Their friends started distancing themselves. My mother lost a major client when the news of the neglect spread. Word got around, and their reputation was destroyed. Uncle Thomas and I stayed in the hotel for a while longer, but the world outside felt quieter now. My parents had lost their grip on everything they had once held dear. They tried to reach out, sending texts and emails, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. There was nothing they could say that would change what had happened. The final custody hearing came in September, and the judge made his decision permanent. Full custody was granted to Uncle Thomas. My parents were ordered to pay child support, and visitation would remain supervised unless I requested otherwise. I never requested otherwise. A few weeks later, my parents reached out again. They sent a long email filled with apologies and promises of change. They said they were different now, that they had learned from their mistakes. They begged me to give them a second chance. I read their message, but I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I had already made my decision. They had abandoned me, and that was something I could never forget. Instead, I focused on my new life. I finished my schooling, went to college, and worked hard to build my future. Uncle Thomas was always there, a steady presence in my life, guiding me through the challenges. Mrs. Rodriguez and Mr. Washington remained a part of my extended family, reminding me that not all people abandon you when you need them most. In the end, the real question wasn't about giving my parents a second chance. The real question was, did I want to? I didn't, and I was finally okay with that.